Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. If you all have your seat, please. Tom and I are going to MC. We're going to start on time.
Hey, wait.
Sit down.
Wait. Hey, who says you get to start?
What do you mean? I'm bigger.
Who
My last
says you
name
get
starts
to
with my
start?
name.
I saw it was a co-host deal, and somebody invited you, and all of a
You're
sudden now
always
you're coming up here just kind of
Okay.
kicking things off?
Rock,
All right, let's go. You can't even do that.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first and last ever public forum on the topic of water, when, where, and why. My name is Tom Wilkins, and I, along with Dick Antoine, will be hosting your...
You got the wrong copy.
Let's start again. We're going to make this fun. This doesn't have to be real. This is going to be a good time. Tonight's forum is brought to you by the Garland County, by the City of Hot Springs and the GGGG. You know what it is. Okay. Garland, okay. GGGG stands for Garland Good Guys and Gals Group. How many girls are in there?
That's pushing.
See, get the girls in there. Okay, representing the city, and we've drawn straws, and David Watkins is going to talk first. The city manager, who is from Auburn, so you can boo now, because that's our first game the Razorbacks play next year. No. David has been in Kansas City. He's been down in Texas. I get to interview him all the time on the radio, and he is representing the city with what we're going to do, what he's proposing to do with the city board with water and why. So, everybody give a big hand for Mr. David Watkins.
Yeah, you know.
We'll cover Tom up. Something's coming.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to address this group. I've been, I think, here probably 2 other times and have some friends in this group. And so I always like the opportunity to bring to you information about things that affect the city of Hot Springs and indeed Garland County. And one of the topics that I was asked to speak about tonight was water supply, why DeGray, why not Washita, what is it that we're facing, what is it that we're trying to solve. Kind of backing up a little bit, just some general information about the City of Hot Springs water system that you may or may not know. The city has 2 plants that we utilize for water treatment. And those are, we have 2 plants. One's located up on what we would call Upper Lake Hamilton, which is about a mile south of Blakely Dam. And the other is an older plant that's located to the east of Cedar Glades Road. When you go over the hill or mountain from downtown, there's a plant that we call Lakeside. And Lakeside is fed by 3 lakes that were built back in the actually late 1800s and 1900s to provide water to the Lakeside plant. And that plant has really operated admirably over the years. The Washita plant that I referenced produces about 21 million gallons per day. The Lakeside plant that I mentioned produces about 4 million gallons per day for a total of 25 million gallons per day. Now, what does that mean to you as customers? We, in the water utility, just like the electric utility, you have to build your systems for peak usage. And the peak usage for water systems is going to be the summer. And that's true in Hot Springs just like it is in most southern climates. The state of Arkansas, the health department, And they come into play because the health department has to approve any intake that you have that draws water within the state of Arkansas, because the water is actually owned by the state. Now, the dam that impounded the water may be federal, and the storage may be federal, but the water itself actually belongs to the state of Arkansas. And so they have a benchmark that they provide that says when you reach 80% of your capacity, then it's time for you to go out and identify other sources or expand your plant. Now, in 2012, when we had a very wet summer, a very dry summer, we exceeded 80% of capacity on 53 days. So we are in the red zone, so to speak, of needing to do something. And that's been on the table for years. The situation was exacerbated back after 2001, or 9/11/2001, when infrastructure had to be analyzed for vulnerability by both federal and private utilities. And in that analysis, the Corps of Engineers declassified or lowered the classification on Blakely Dam. Now, they've since made the repairs, and we think it's going to be reclassified. But for that period, it was declassified, which created an issue theoretically with Lake Hamilton. And so Lake Hamilton, which is owned by a private utility, Entergy, had to analyze the impact of a deteriorating Blakely Dam, theoretically, and what would happen if the dam broke. Well, if the dam broke, it would cause problems with the dam at Carpenter. Likewise, if the dam at Carpenter, the Tainer gates are the gates that Energy uses to release water. And so if those gates failed, it was the determination of the Entergy engineers that it would, by the time they got the gate repaired, the upper Lake Hamilton intake that we had would be sticking out of the mud like a straw. And so that's when they told us, we're not going to sell you any additional water from that intake site until you have a second water source. And I've heard people say, well, how black and white is that? Having met with Energy, that's black and white. And so the city's been out pursuing different water supplies. Now, one thing that mystifies people in this area is that we're surrounded by water. And if we're surrounded by water, how could we possibly have a water issue? Good question, one that we answer all the time. And it's because the water that you see is owned by different, not the water, but the capacity is owned by different entities, none of whom have to sell anything. And so Lake Hamilton, we have maxed out our amount that we can take from Lake Hamilton until we secure a second water source. The Lakeside plant is old. Clean Water Act requirements are going up. You're having to put in new equipment to treat. And you get to a point in these old plants where you really have to mothball because of the cost. And so we are planning to mothball Lakeside at some point. Thus, our challenge was, where do we go for water? If Lake Hamilton's off the table, then what else is available? Well, my board hired the firm of Kristen Associates out of Little Rock, a company that just designed a major new intake facility up on Greer's Ferry Lake for the Lone Oak Water Authority. Big project, well done, very similar to what would have to be done at either Ouachita or DeGray here. And so they were commissioned with the task of identifying potential water supply options. And they looked at the Ouachita River below Rimmel Dam. Kimsey has an intake below Rimmel Dam. It's a small intake, but nonetheless they have an intake. They wanted us to look at Lake Catherine. They wanted us to look once again at Lower Lake Hamilton. We looked at Blakely Dam, actually, drawing water from the water that has gone through the turbines to see if that was a possibility. And then we looked at Lake DeGray, and we looked at the main pool of Lake Ouachita. Well, Lower Lake Hamilton was removed immediately because of all the furor that came out of the 2010-11 effort, where it looked like the the State Department of Health would not approve a permit. And like I said earlier, you have to get an intake permit from them, period. No questions asked. And so our challenge was, could we actually get intake sites approved by the Department of Health at the aforementioned water supply options? And so we actually took the Department of Health individuals that have to make that decision out on boats. We went into Lake Catherine, down to Rimmel, took a boat on Lake Ouachita, took a boat on Lake Catherine, because I already mentioned Catherine, took a boat on Lake DeGray. We submitted various intake sites. Well, when you go into those federal lakes, you not only have to get permission from the state, you have to get permission from the Corps of Engineers, who own both of those lakes. And so we had to escort Corps officials and have been working with them very closely on approving an intake site at either lake. The Ouachita area is complicated a little bit further by the fact that while the lake is under the province of the U.S. Corps of Engineers, the property above a certain elevation is actually controlled and owned by the U.S. Forest Service. And so if you go onto their property, you have to get a permit from them also. And so what came out of that discussion and that exploratory phase of this project was that we have an intake approved on Lake DeGray at the Arlie Miller State Park, which is adjacent to another intake that Kimsey has in Lake DeGray. We have approval, and when I say approval, we have signed letters from the Department of Health. These are approved. Our second intake that we looked at and have approval is for a site at what used to be called the Spillway area at Ouachita. Now we call it Echo Canyon. And the intake site they approved is kind of in that slough area that you traverse to get back to the marina. And so that's the two intake sites. Well, if you locate intake sites, you have to make sure you can get energy to them. And the challenge on the Ouachita site was that there's no access to that intake. And so a road will have to, or if we chose that, would have had to have been built to provide access to the intake. Also, you have to get a permit from the National Forest Service to go through their property. And the location of the intake would have required a pretty significant pump to push that up and over the mountain that's adjacent to Echo Canyon. So You hear people say, well, why don't you just put an intake at the dam and run it downhill? Well, that wasn't approved and would not be approved. So that was kind of the task that we pursued, trying to find these sites. And so let me just, this is another FYI that I think is very important when it comes up. It comes back to where should the plant be built. The Red Dragon, is what I call it, is the City of Hot Springs water utility territory. We serve all the way from the Garland County Fairgrounds, all the way out to Camp Charlton, all the way down here to Jack Mountain, and all the way up here to Lake DeGray. The City of Hot Springs is in the green. So when we talk about planning for the future, don't think about Hot Springs as being the only customers. We actually have, I'd say it's almost 50-50 inside and outside the city limits. So if you hear, well, your population's declining, why are you building a plant? It's because our population is growing outside the city. Now, some people would say, why are we growing the city outside the city, which doesn't make sense to the taxpayers of Hot Springs? And Mr. Jackson and I have discussed that. But nonetheless, that's what we have done. And so, what number did we use in planning our future population? One thing about water is you have to plan water out at least 50 years, and preferably longer than that. Why is that? Well, you can produce electricity out of just about anything. Biofuels, coal, oil, nuclear. You cannot make water. So what we have is what we have. And we're fortunate that we have these high-quality Corps of Engineer lakes. I can tell you, having been a city manager in Texas, Texas is very fast-growing, as you know. A lot of their water is groundwater. Surface water options are difficult because of the difficulty of getting permits to build lakes and just buying property for lakes. And so Texas has been eyeing neighboring states for water. And they just went through a very long, contentious lawsuit with the state of Oklahoma over the Red River and Lake Texoma. They lost it in the short term, but there's a lot of muscle in that state. And it has been talked about, and I would not, believe me, I would put my money on it, that these lakes up in Arkansas, while they are quite some distance, when you look at your alternative and you're dealing with 24 million people expected to grow up above 30 million, you can run pipeline a long way. So my recommendation to our board has been secure as much water as you can now, because it won't be there. And we have to think about not water today or not water in 5 years or 10 years, water 50 years. And so when we looked at population projections, we didn't use our own projections. We used the University of Arkansas at Little Rock's demographic data. They are the state population collector and predictor for the state, a neutral party. And their prediction is that Garland County will grow, and this is probably on the low end, but it's the one we took, should grow at about 1% per year. Now, will that growth occur in Hot Springs? No, unless we can annex more property or we get higher densities, which I think are coming. But I do think we're going to see growth in these various corridors. developers. And why do I say that? Because I am hit up almost weekly by people wanting water connections out in that red area. So I'm assuming that developers are looking at this area growing. And with the Lake Hamilton bond issue passing, I'm assuming that was the impetus behind that. So we have to serve a bigger area. And just for point of reference, if you go back to 1976, the city had, our water utility has doubled the number of meters. If you go back and look at our peak, excuse me, not the meters, the usage, we have doubled the amount of usage since 76, which you would expect. On the peak side, we've actually gone up somewhere between 200% and 300%. And so when we're thinking ahead, we can't be short-sighted. There are way too many parts of this country who have done that, and now they are scrambling. So let's learn from the past, which is plan for the future. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, you know, why DeGray? Well, what is it about DeGray that makes sense? Well, let me flip this map around. And as you can see, this is Lake Washita. This is our current intake. This is Lake Hamilton. This is Lake DeGray. Now, for reasons I will get into, we don't need to build another plant up in the north side of the district. Already got two up there. We know the growth is going to occur west, and we think east and south. Why is that? There's a lot of highway improvements planned on the east side. Highway 70, 290, 7 south. If you go out on 290, there is an abundance of undeveloped property that is there for development. And here again, we're trying to predict what the future is going to be like. You know, what's it going to be like in 50 years? I don't know. But we have to plan. And so people say, well, it's closer to Lake Washita than Lake DeGray. Well, that assumes that your treatment plant would be located near the lake, Washita, which it will not. The treatment plant is going to be built somewhere in the vicinity of Highway 7 and the 290 corridor. That's where we need another plant. We need another plant for redundancy. We need another plant for looping our system. Now, one of the realities of being in the business of water is not a governmental service, it's a business. You know, we sell to you, you have other options. You know, we want to sell to you, but in Arkansas, the cities do not have to serve outside the city limits. There's no requirement that the city do that, but we do that, and we'll continue to do that. And so, you know, look at, you know, we're permitted. We have to have an operating permit. If we violate the permit, we get fined. It gets rather onerous. And so one of the problems that we are experiencing in our water utility is that because we don't have a plant in the south, we're not getting the kind of circulation in the water system that you need to deal with what the scientists call the age of water. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm a generalist, but I employ people either by contract or on my staff who understand this. And there is a byproduct that occurs in chlorinated water. It's called trihalomethanes, or I will call those THLs. Now, THLs are a result of what happens when water isn't moving. The chlorine and the carbon in the water will start breaking down, and it causes this THL, which is a carcinogenic substance. And so the feds are monitoring THLs, and we are experiencing higher THLs than we should be having in that south part of the district. We have to deal with that. You know, we're accountable for that. That is a decision that we've made. So it becomes, okay, if you have to build the plant south, then how do you get to it? And so the intake on Upper Lake Washita that we're looking at would be here. That's over by Echo Canyon. We have to get from there to here. The intake that we have at Lake DeGray is located here at Arley Miller Park, and we have to get to here. So, you know, I know that's been a bone of contention because it doesn't seem logical, but it is very logical. And so when we look at cost, now I will say this, you know, we try to operate a very open government. We have FOI requests coming in every day. I got my staff doing nothing but FOI requests. And so there's nothing that I'm going to give you that you don't already hear, Bob already has, because we've given this out. Anybody here can get anything I talk about. There are no secrets. There's no backroom deals. This is information that you as a customer are entitled to get. And so when we started looking at DeGray versus Washita, the cost of that transmission line came into play. And the intake sites, the intake cost at Washita is higher than the intake site at DeGray because you have to build that access road in a very, very mountainous area. Probably add somewhere around $1.5 million with contingencies, fairly close to $2 million, at least for estimated cost. So that's a variable that worked against Washita. The cost of the treatment plant's the same because we're going to the same site. It's just from what direction. Then you come down to, okay, what is the cost of the transmission line? How do we get from A to B? What's that going to cost? Well, because the route is shorter from DeGray to the plant site, the savings in the capital cost is significant, somewhere over $10 million because of a shorter route. Now what's the downside to that? As Mr. Driggers has pointed out very well, and we've talked about this, if you're pushing water uphill, your O&M cost is going to be higher, obviously. But you have to weigh the O&M cost versus the capital cost. Our goal is to get the lowest rates we can. We're not trying to, I have no sentimentality toward DeGray or Washita. I just want to get water to you. But when you run the capital costs versus the O&M cost, you have to make up the difference in O&M with the additional capital. And so that analysis has been done. That's public information. You can get that. We know that the cost of running water uphill is greater than running partially downhill. So remember, we still have to push water up and over Washita. The variables, you know, and I'll be interested to see Bob's analysis because the new plant on the south end for quite some time, I predict, is not going to be running at the same capacity as the one on the north side. And so if we owned a utility, if we owned an electric utility, I have managed 2 electric utilities. Been in that game. When you're in the electric game, you look at your operation, you look at your cost of producing power or buying power. If you have a coal-fired unit, you know it's cheaper to run that than an oil-fired unit. And running an oil-fired unit might be cheaper than buying peak power from an interconnecting utility. Well, we will look every day, I promise you, at which system is it worth running at a higher capacity. Upper Lake, Hamilton is 290. And so when we talk about the cost of energy to run that water uphill, I need to know what variable we're looking at, because I don't know that load factor. So I'm anxious to see that, and we'll be able to respond to that. A couple other things about our system that I think you need to know is that the City of Hot Springs water utility is not interconnected with anybody. We have an emergency connection with North Garland. That is it. So if we lost one of our plants, we are out of business. Whereas when I was city manager of Bryan, Texas, we had interconnections with Texas A&M and College Station. So if any one of us had a problem, the others could supply. We don't have that option here. That's why having additional capacity is absolutely paramount. When the Majestic burned, we were putting about 500,000 gallons of water an hour on that fire. That's 12 million gallons of water a day. Our capacity is 25 million. What if we'd had another fire? At the same time, we're trying to supply you with water. We couldn't do it. We were drawing down water from our water tanks, which is the backup to the backup. So, I mean, you know, I'm not saying we're in a crisis, but we need to be smarter than that. We need to get ahead of this curve, and that's our plan. I guess to wrap up, and I'll be glad to entertain questions. Obviously, you know, we want our rates to be competitive because we want to attract industry. We want to provide as low cost of living as we can possibly have here. And to that regard, you know, and these are not my numbers, these are independent numbers. The City of Hot Springs, inside the city limit rate, is the 27th lowest out of 893 water systems in Arkansas, number 27. The outside the city is, I believe, in the 80 range. So there's 800 districts that charge more to outside than we do. And so, yes, balancing the water rates is critical. I guess I want to make sure, though, you know, a lot of issues we kick down the road. I think the Tea Party would agree that by not dealing with entitlement reform, we're just kicking a can down the road. And one day my kids are going to have to pay the bill because nobody wanted to deal with this issue. Well, I don't want to kick the water can down the road. I don't want my kids and their kids to go, what were they thinking about in 2014? We can't grow, we don't have water, we're having to take draconian measures, and the water has all been spoken for, because it will be. So I think we have an opportunity here to do the right thing for Hot Springs and Garland County. So, yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions.
We're going to take questions after Bob talks.
Yeah, but I forget.
Write it down.
Well, thank you.
going to have a speech from Sue Clark with the Tea Party, who wants to get up and speak for a couple of minutes. Is she here? Okay. And we are going to take questions after Bob does his, and then you can ask questions to both.
Not really a speech, but it is a little more scripted than normally. And I can tell you already that from my point of view, tonight's forum is a success. Because obviously I did not know everything that Mr. Watkins explained when I came. So I'm going to tell you that I'm going to go ahead with my presentation exactly as I came with it, which will show you what we're supposed to be doing. Get the information out there, I will learn something, and maybe bottom line, we'll be able to express some concerns that explain why some of the objections that you've heard are not all scientific, but some of them are, because many of us are generalists and want to know and have that trust in the information that we're dealing with. So I will not be addressing as many technical issues. However, they're up there and it may put a couple of you to sleep. So mine's really shorter than Bob's going to handle that other stuff. This is essentially a short overview that's about the concerns that city and county residents who are customers of the city regarding information and questions about aspects of the whole issue of obtaining water for the city of Hot Springs and other customers. I like to think of this evening as shedding light on the subject so that we're not talking at each other with misinformation and rather trying to find some solutions that are best. The issues, of course, that brought up the concerns among customers are the recent bond refinancing to fund the DeGray water project, and I know that was limited. Well, it was approval to spend $3.8 million on design and engineering. What was perceived by those of us that are not at the meetings, which of course we can be, and we can FOI, but from some of us, our ignorance is, causes the distrust. But to us, there wasn't as much notice that this was going to happen. That happens in government. And also what seems to be a conflict with the city resolution that was done in 2011, as a result of all the controversy and the fact that the other project did not go through. And the quote from that that I see a conflict with is, capital projects must be undertaken in a manner to minimize the impact to ratepayers, obviously, and you did address that, by ensuring that such projects are necessary, that they are reasonable and dedicated to furtherance of those principles. So the resolution was actually done in 2011, as I said, after a group of residents brought it to the city board's attention that the Arkansas Department of Health would not approve the proposed South Lake Hamilton water project under consideration. Actually, that happened in writing like 11 times while the board was still working to promote that particular project. So because at that time it seemed, and I am definitely not one of the people that was on the inside, but it seemed that the directors were not fully informed of that particular information, and the spending continued, and of course the spending on the design and engineering was to the tune of about $3 million and resulted in a rate increase for which the perception was there was no additional benefit. City and county water utility customers are concerned that the current project could result in the same kind of consequences, not because the project cannot be built, but because it's being promoted as a solution to an unsubstantiated emergency, not a crisis. All of those things, you bear in mind that I've heard a lot of things tonight that I didn't know, but that these issues are still very real for water customers, and that it's not in compliance with the city's own resolution regarding the capital projects. The project appears to be presented as an emergency, and customers didn't know that. For whatever reason, customers didn't know that. And for most of us, that's our responsibility. Without notice to utility customers, the board authorized $3.8 million for engineering and design of the Lake DeGray intake and treatment plant, which will be built in Hot Springs County. It's not surprising that some residents may suspect that this project, like the previous one, may have a negative influence on rates and may not be necessary at this time. Because rates for water use are fees as opposed to taxes, they do not require a vote of the residents who are affected, only the board of directors. It is hopeful to me that tonight we will have an opportunity for an honest and open exchange of information about this project that will affect so many and should be thoroughly studied by those who will pay for it. That's us. That leads to the first question, which is, where is that emergency? Excuse me, guys. Jacobs Engineering and the Arkansas Department of Health and Christ Engineers have all reported in writing during their individual studies that Hot Springs does not need to start planning for additional water facility until about the year 2030, especially if the city follows the reasonable and cost-effective improvements to our existing 2 treatment plants and implements conservation policies as recommended by the Arkansas Department of Health. The slides should indicate, and these came from the Department of Health. Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't matter, does it? It didn't work, Bob, what do I do? There it is, thank you. It would appear, if I were looking at it, it would appear that these improvements alone would provide adequate additional treated water quantity for a 15 to 25 year planning period before the cost of an additional treatment plant at the Upper Lake Hamilton site would need to be incurred. Again, that's part of the study from the Arkansas Department of Health from June 10th of 2010. During that 15 to 25 year period, the system would have adequate time to pursue improvements that would optimize utilization of water storage. Guys, these are technical and I hate to read them, but the fact is they all apply. You would minimize water age, which we talked about, in the distribution system. More precisely document growth rates and growth patterns for use in planning the second half of a 50-year planning period. Make necessary distribution system piping improvements consistent with observed growth patterns and hydraulic needs, and reduce the rate at which water is lost in the distribution system. And that figure is currently believed to be 35 to 40% of all treated water produced. In summary, this office encourages the Hot Springs Water Utility, again this is from the Department of Health 4 years ago, to promptly pursue improvements to the existing intake site and the Ouachita Water Treatment Plant so that capacity needs for this medium range planning period are met. The ADH letter encouraged the Hot Springs Water Utility to pursue improvements that would result in an additional 9 million gallons per day of source and treatment capacity, bringing the system total to 35 million gallons per day of source and treatment capacity, bringing the system, it's understood that this expansion would be an additional 9 million per day of conventional treatment facilities would operate in parallel to the existing conventional treatment plant. And that being the case, no additional sampling or analysis would be required prior to the design of this particular conventional treatment. It is in fact the case that the Lakeside plant routinely produces water that meets the requirements for their federal Safe Drinking Water Act. Also, previous planning in conjunction with the utility's expected use of water from Lake Ouachita as a source clearly indicated continued use and investment of the Lakeside plant. Again, this is information that came from the health department, but you'll notice the date is a year later. This is July of 2009. So now let's look at the water supply study for the city of Hot Springs. This is the recent CRIST study from August of 2013. provided a needs assessment and reports that after discussing population data and economic data with input from City Planning Department of the Chamber of Commerce and the West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District, concluded no significant changes in water demand patterns are anticipated based on chamber-targeted industry. That's not necessarily comprehensive. And greater water demand may shift to the east side of the service area as a consequence of transportation improvements and developments. And as a consequence of discussions with city staff, it was determined that the planning horizon for this study would be 2060. Further, it was determined that the initial improvements will be planned to meet the nearer term needs of about 2030. And I may not understand that timing, but it bears you and I looking into that, what that means, if I'm misunderstanding it. Combined, the city has a current water treatment plant capacity of 25 million gallons per day, which includes 21 at the Washita plant and 4 at the Lakeside plant. We agree on that, absolutely. If lost and unaccounted for water is reduced, or if the water conservation programs result in less water used per meter, the need for a future additional water treatment capacity could be delayed. Again, trying to reconcile the information that I'm hearing or I'm understanding with what we're looking at in the proposal. There's also a resolution that was done by the city board post 2010 when the issue was when it came up about South Lake Hamilton. The question being, why is there such a rush? Why should current ratepayers allow the water rates to jump higher and higher over the next 16 years? That part is obviously debatable, but it is a concern and it needs to be expressed on behalf of customers in the local area. After the South Lake Hamilton project was quashed, the city board created and adopted Resolution 7674, signed by the board in June of 2011. It included the CRIS study. It is included in the CRIS study, excuse me. It also hired Gary Carnahan as engineer to oversee improvements to the city's existing Washita and Lakeside water treatment plants. My question would be, have we done those things that were in that study? Is there a conservation plan? What were the results? In the resolution, it states that capital projects must be undertaken. I've already read that once, but it refers to the capital projects and furtherance of the principles. In seeking new sources of raw water, priority shall be given to the elimination of impediments to extracting raw water directly from Lake Washita. Should this not be possible in a reasonable time frame, then the current Washita River, which is North Lake Hamilton intake location, should be the next priority. Prior to undertaking construction of new water treatment facility, expansion of the existing plants shall be thoroughly evaluated and cost effectiveness of expansion versus new facilities analyzed. Now, it seems like interrupting the train of thought here if you had a train going my direction. But what's the deal with the Central Arkansas water deal? I've put this in here at this point because just the general questions. Is this necessary, this agreement? Is it reasonable? Does it minimize impact on the ratepayers? Is it even appropriate to obligate the ratepayer to this expense before we know what facility is going to be built? Understand that Central Arkansas Water is the Central Arkansas Water Consortium, and it has rights to 120 million gallons per day from DeGray that is not currently being used. The City of Hot Springs has already paid or contracted to pay $1.2 million to Central Arkansas Water for the opportunity or the privilege of drawing 15 million gallons per day from DeGray sometime in the future. Plus, it will also pay an annual fee of about $25,000. Hot Springs will pay all the cost of purchasing the right-of-way, the intake facility, and the pipelines to the treatment plant. And we don't know for sure from the Army Corps of Engineers about the allotment that we've requested from Lake Washita. We may know for sure. I can't take that. Okay. Is it reasonable that Hot Springs should pay all the costs, which includes pipelines for other water utility systems? Back to Resolution 7674. In seeking new sources of raw water, priority shall be given to the elimination of impediments. Already read that one. Again, then go back to Washita River. Yes. Any expansion of the Washita facility should include design techniques to increase redundancy, facilitating the future maintenance requirements and allowing for shutdown of various plant elements for maintenance. The conservation of existing water resources and usage shall be a core element of all future planning and analysis, including but not limited to development of comprehensive conservation plan. That's the resolution of the board in 2011. I don't know, all of those things may have been carried out, considered, and documented precisely in that way. I'm not aware of it. Is the mandated conservation plan available to residents and ratepayers? I haven't FOI'd it. That's on me. That's on us for not finding out. It may very well be. There's it seems that there are conflicts with this resolution that I would like to have explained to me, and I'd like some of that ignorance dispelled tonight, if at all possible. It's simply a quest for information on the part of customers and residents, in my opinion. Is it an emergency? Why not comply with the resolution? Why commit to Central Arkansas Water without a proven need? We have options. Oh, there should be more there. I don't know where they are. I'll read them for you. Oh, I'm sorry. See, y'all know I don't know how to do this. Okay, so they come up one at a time, and you can read them. But obviously, do nothing is probably not a good idea. I'll certainly buy that from the need that was presented by Mr. Watkins. But do nothing about this project. No, find out what's going on, and then do we bear the cost or not? Stop and wait for Washita. We may or may not have an answer. I'm not aware that we have an answer on Washita that's out. Expand the current plant and have an autonomous board. That would be a different kind of administration for the water. Do the conservation, as we said in the resolution. Cut current losses of treated water, that 35 to 40%. And one of them would be to change the board if we're not getting that communication. I think tonight goes away to improving that communication. I think it goes a long way toward having everyone more responsible to each other. I would say that in conclusion, oops, I clicked too far. It just said in conclusion, which you're glad to hear. Hopefully, tonight's forum will be enlightening to all concerned and result in greater participation and problem solving in the city of Hot Springs for the people of Hot Springs. Please attend the city board meetings and agenda meetings to support your board of directors when it's warranted and to hold your elected representatives accountable as it is our responsibility to do. It's incumbent upon all of us to stay informed about these issues which affect us, not just complain when we are hit by the negative results.
Okay, this just handed me. Get my glasses off so I can read. Introducing some folks that apparently are in the audience tonight. Senator Alan Clark. Alan, where are you at? There you are back there. Our Mayor Ruth Carney. Our County Treasurer Tim Stockdale. Past Director Peggy Thurman. JP Mary Bornable. Another JP, Matt McGee. Candidate for county judge, Clay Herman. And a candidate for county sheriff, Mike McCormick. Okay, have I missed anyone?
JP Ellen Barhall.
Ellen Barhala, another JP, sorry Ellen.
Lori's here. Lori Rushing's here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't look past the second row. Lori Rushing back there. And last and certainly least, George Pritchard. Okay, we have two more speakers. The last one's not going to be very long at all. But I want to introduce Bob Driggers back here. Bob, I took the liberty of going on the internet because I did everything last minute and lost time, everything. So I went on there very quickly to find out just 3 sentences about your bio. A retired astronaut and one-time U.S. ambassador to Russia. Bob also once trained and flew the space shuttle in 1971. Congratulations. Wait, I think I got the wrong one. He retired from his career as an electrical engineer in Texas. Is this the right one? Yeah. Have you ever been to Texas? He retired from his career as an electrical engineer in Texas and moved back to Garland County, where he'd actually grown up. After questioning some actions by a previous city board, he decided to go ahead and formulate the GGGG. The group has had numerous successes over the years in bringing out transparency in local government. Tonight, Bob represents the other side of the water issue story. Mr. Bob Driggers.
Bob?
Yes, Alan.
There's 2 other candidates here that I saw that we were candidate for Sheriff Mike McCormick. I'm a candidate for Hot Spring County Judge Robert Ellerd. Back there in the back.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate you pointing that out. I don't know where the heck you came up with either one of those bios, but the second one was closer. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lake DeGray project concerns. There will probably be just a minor bit of duplication of what Sue said, but I'll try to skip over that pretty fast. A couple of points I jotted down here while David was speaking. And by the way, I didn't find any inaccuracies in anything that David said. The Tater Gate failure that Entergy keeps talking about at Carpenter Dam. Do you know how many Tater Gates have failed in the United States in recorded history? United States, Reggie. 1. There's been 2 in the world. One was in Japan. However, 38 dams have failed, mostly in California, by the way. Anyway, what we need to talk about tonight, and most of, well, all of what we have gotten our material from the city. And it's from Chris Jacobs, Carter Burgess, which was the predecessor of Jacobs. And these are things that just make you want to scratch your head. Why would they do that? And here's the 4 things that I wanted to cover tonight. There's about 20 things that we could talk about, but the majority of them get kind of in the technicalities. You know, so far I don't even know the media type that they're planning to use, a filter type, where they're using sedimentation ponds, where they're using membranes, reverse osmosis, distillation, what they're going to do. But we assume it's kind of a standard filtration. But we don't know that yet. But let's talk about location. This is the location of the project they're talking about currently. The raw water intake is down right on the Clark County border in Hot Spring County. They apparently have, I assume you still have the 6 different options or 5 different options for the right-of-way, but the 42-inch pipeline will end up here now. I understand the preferred location is water treatment plant 2. If you'll notice one thing about this entire project, it's all in Hot Spring County. Now, when we started talking about Washita sometime back, I don't know how we ended up over at Spillway and having to go over a mountain. But this was Jacobs originally, a recommendation. Jacobs Engineering was an intake just above the dam. And coming around, you notice the topo lines here at about the same elevation and then drop down. Now, that's not very far because the existing treatment plant is right down here. We could take advantage and make use of existing rights-of-ways, except for this, that all goes through Forest Service land. And by the way, we did talk to the Forest Service back then because the city was telling us the Forest Service won't talk to us, they won't give us the land. I know some of the brass at the Forest Service. They were telling me, we've never been asked. We've talked about, and this was the time when Obama first came in and he had stimulus money available. And the Forest Service was telling me, he said, you know, we would like to put a little lake up here somewhere, use some of that stimulus money. We could work with the city maybe. So just makes you scratch your head. Here's the location again. And you wonder why. If you look at the existing treatment plant and the intake that was initially proposed, they're pretty close together, you'll see up there. Well, when they tell us that DeGray is closer, you got to kind of say closer to what? Well, here's the intake at DeGray. Here's the city of Hot Springs, and they're telling us it's closer to DeGray. Okay, here's the reason. Put the water treatment plant down there close to the DeGray, and it would be closer, wouldn't it? Okay, what makes sense of this, putting everything in Hot Spring County? Why would we do that? Well, you kind of scratch your head, you might ask yourself the question, could it be because of the Central Arkansas Water Agreement? Because if you take a look, that's pretty much in line with a straight to Benton, isn't it? Otherwise, why would you want to put a water treatment plant down there on the side of Jack Mountain in Hot Spring County? Or, if you look on the Crest Water Study on page 1, you will see that one of the things that was considered was the potential industrial park in Rockport, Malvern. Oh, that's kind of handy to that area too, isn't it? So are we doing something for Hot Springs in Garland County, or are we doing something for Hot Spring County? Okay. I've heard Mr. Watkins and numerous others use the word redundant. You know the meaning of the word redundant? It's an adjective repeating something else and therefore unnecessary. If you get down to the final possibility, I'm sorry I went too far too soon, you will see right down here, serving as a duplicate. In other words, in electric systems, we would often have redundant relays, identical relays. I think what the engineer and Mr. Watkins means to use here is a diversity. Have some diversity of system. I've heard him talk about the fact that he was using a different watershed. That's not redundant. We're told that the growth corridor is southeast. Okay? The growth corridor within Garland County, then, is this area about like this. Because over here is Kimsey water. So they're kind of stuck in there, aren't they? And if they're talking because of transportation improvements, the transportation improvements is actually the 4-laning of Highway 70 east and the extension of the bypass. That's not southeast. That's east or northeast. So anyway, you just kind of have to scratch your head. Why the heck would they do it this way? Hot Spring County. The entire system. Hot Spring County. Okay, how about the terrain? I understand this is the very last meeting, they hired a geotechnical firm to go and take a look at the terrain they're going to have to cross. It it's gonna be kind of interesting what they find. This is the route I would recommend instead of one of those 5 or 6 others. That's just, you know, that may be a little shorter going that way. You could actually work your way around and in between a couple of 3 mountains here. Maybe you'll have to go over only Jack Mountain. Of course, those are short mountains, 750, 800 feet. Okay, now we've looked at location, let's talk about cost. What's it gonna cost to put this down here? Well, this is a pipeline down in the Rio Grande Valley where we moved here from. It's pretty easy digging down there. It's all sand. This is a water pipeline in Austin, Texas. It's going over here to water treatment plant number 4. Matter of fact, I used to live just off Jollyville Road. I'm sure that maybe you probably know where that is too in Austin. Limestone down there. I don't think limestone is as hard as the rock we have on Jack Mountain, to be honest with you, but at any rate, we may end up with something like this. It's a little bit more expensive than something like this. So let's just talk about what those project costs are going to be. We know when Jacobs was here, they estimated the cost, which was not a lot of difference in mileage, $105 million for the 42-inch pipeline, 38 to Washita at the time. Okay, they also estimated a few other things. Of course, these are some things here that I took off of another slide. Matter of fact, this was a slideshow that I gave to Mr. Watkins probably a year ago, right? And had some of these things that we were concerned about at the time. But it's worth repeating, most of this right-of-way already exists up here, except for the very top end. And almost 100% of this down here would be required. And that is private right-of-way, folks. Until you get up past Bismarck quite a ways. And again, that's a different route because that was Jacobs. And we found out subsequently that there's also some pump stations required. I think back then we were talking about 2. We're now talking about 3. They said 3 1,750 horsepower pump stations are going to be required along the way. Well, this is what a pump station looks like. I was kind of surprised to see Chris say we need 3 1,750 horsepower pumps. I think you need 4 425 horsepower pumps. What's going to happen on that line if that 1,750 horsepower pump station goes out? Probably the whole line goes. But if you build your pump station like this, you can always take one out for maintenance or a replacement or whatever, and your pipeline keeps going. So, this is that CAW agreement again, and as a matter of fact, I know that Sue covered the amount's already been paid and what we've agreed to. This is the one that kind of troubles me though. Hot Springs sole cost of the expense shall acquire an 80-foot wide easement for the installation, maintenance, repair of multiple water pipelines. In other words, we're going to pay for all that private right-of-way. 80-foot wide. And if you're putting in lines that you're going to build a road in there. Otherwise, you can't get these heavier equipment in there. So we're going to end up with quite a bit of work. Not going to be all that soft dirt like that. Some of it might look a bit like this down south of DeGray. We've got a lot of clay so forth down there, don't we? And again, some of it's going to look very rocky, or even worst case, have to tunnel through some mountains. That's not cheap. Do you remember this as being the initial project that the city lost $2.8 million on? Well, they just 3 weeks ago approved 3 instead of 2.8, 3.833 million for design and engineering of this new facility. Here was the old facilities inn. Remember this intake? That's right in front of Carpenter Dam. It looked like they already built the thing there. It looks pretty nice, doesn't it? $20 million, I think, was what they had estimated for that. We've been unable to get any cost estimates for most of this from Chris. But Jacob's cost back then, this water treatment plant was $100 million. Wonder why they dug it out and put it so far down below the normal grade. Could it have anything to do with pumping and overcoming the head? That 170-foot difference between DeGray and Washita pool elevation. Did they were they smart enough to think, you know, hey, we could overcome 20 foot of head just by building our plant down here in the hole? Smart thing. Or just scratch your head, why would you do that? Well, you'll recall that the health department did shut that down. But they also, I don't believe this is the one, but there is also a letter that said, we're very disappointed that Hot Springs has apparently discontinued your interest in Washita water, Lake Washita. They didn't understand it. So, if we took just those items that picked up from Jacobs, the pipeline cost of $105 million, the treatment plant, the intake cost. Let's forget that the pump stations are going to cost anything. The right-of-way is probably going to be pretty expensive, but let's forget that. And those truck lines, in order to get the water out from the treatment plant over to new elevated storage, plus the elevated storage, and then the distribution lines into the existing system, we'll say zero cost. Still $225 million. Plus electricity. You know, David said we were going to have to get electricity into the Washita site. It's going to be expensive. It may not be cheap to get it to Jack Mountain either. But the utilities, the roads, the fencing, the alarms, the SCADA system, in other words, if you've got remote pumping stations, you're either going to have demand or you're going to have a supervisory control and data acquisition system there. So these are basically the beginning costs only, right? Capital costs. What about those continuing costs? Operating. The operating costs continue long after the bonds are paid off. As a matter of fact, if anything, they're going to go up because your cost for manpower, your cost for especially electricity is likely not to come down. This is what the health department already chatted the city for back in 10. To exclude such costs presents only half the picture, however this is what Jacobs has apparently done. You'll recall back then we kept saying, what's your operating costs? Give us your operating costs, the day-to-day costs, after the capital costs are paid off. We never could get that. Health department didn't like it either. This comparative analysis was the heading of the slide, as a matter of fact, David, that I gave you a year ago, where we actually did some comparisons directly with Lake Washita. I don't know if you can read that, but that says 170-foot difference. Lake Washita's average pool elevation is 578 feet. DeGray's 408 feet. You've got to overcome that head difference. The cost to overcome the elevation difference, plus the cost of transport, doesn't matter if it's polished water or raw water, the distance is involved and the friction is certainly a factor. And as a matter of fact, the friction itself, I had a hydraulics engineer calculated for me, 1.5 million pound-feet. I learned all that is foot-pounds. Why did they change that to pound-feet? Anyway, that's what you hear nowadays. But these were the operating costs that were omitted by Jacobs. And if you look at the 15 million gallons a day that they're talking about down there, It's actually, a gallon of water is 8.33 pounds, so 124 million pounds just overcome the head. And if you look at it foot-pounds, as I like to call it, 21 billion pounds you're moving every day, just to overcome the head. So here's basically a graphic representation of the choices that we have. Hamilton's where we're taking our water now. And most people wouldn't believe, but Hamilton's pool level is actually lower than DeGray. And of course, Lake Washita, over 2,700,000 acre-feet. DeGray's less than half that. So which is the more reliable source? But we're talking about cost. Now let's talk about reliability. I don't think there's any question that the more reliable source would be Washita, would it not? I mentioned the watershed a little while ago. It's a good thing if we get another lake that's in an entirely different watershed. Well, not necessarily. The watershed for Lake Washita is over 1,100 square miles. The watershed for DeGray is 450 square miles. You know, I spent a lot of time on the Caddo River and the Washita also as a kid. But I can tell you, I used to walk across the Caddo River in the summertime when the peak demand is the worst. So what's replenishing DeGray? Makes you want to scratch your head. The Washita River flow, cubic foot per second. You can look this up on the internet. This was for, I think, about a week ago. But you can see that Washita is over double what Caddo's is. For replenishment and after a rain event or whatever, here's the rain event that happened on the same day, and these two watersheds aren't far enough apart to where one of them's going to get rain and the other one not typically. But the bottom line is the replenishment rate is also more than double on the Washita than it is the Caddo. So, let's talk now about the need. Is there truly a need? And I know Sue covered some of this. But we're talking about pipeline flows and that sort of thing. But again, what the points that she made are worth repeating. It said, the health department said, if you make these improvements alone at the existing plant, in other words, add 9 million gallons per day, that you've got a quantity for a 15 to year planning period, 15 to 25 year planning period, and you can do an awful lot of things down here during that period. So when you say that the health department is the driving force behind forcing Hot Springs to do something now, that's not what the health department is saying. They're saying make improvements to your existing stuff, and you can get by 15 to 25 years. This is a slide I found, some information I found in FOI that just kind of boggled my mind. Beg your pardon, made me want to scratch my head. This was a meeting with the Corps of Engineers. Wasn't the board of directors, wasn't the public of Hot Springs, but went down to see the Corps of Engineers. But the discussion was, and one of the talking points that was brought up that needed to be discussed was the fact that Hot Springs needs a source of water treatment immediately. Who told them that? Dave, apparently it was you, Richard Penn, and Gary Carnahan, because you were the only Hot Springs representatives at the meeting. So combined, they would have a treatment capacity of 25 million, and they say we need to start planning again in about 30. By the way, if you go to the Hot Springs website, it's another one of those things that make you want to scratch your head. The city says they have 27.5 million gallons of potable water per day. That's what they're producing. And do you know, we also found a couple of agreements with Entergy and with FERC that we hadn't been told about. Guess how much we can actually take in a day by agreement? 30 million gallons per day. You know that. Why does the public not know that? So anyway, 30 million gallons a day is what they can take. Now, if they go over 30 million, they have to pay a little more. There's a little different rate schedule that they prepared for that. So, they're talking about population and serving more population. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, but they did indeed eventually agree to use the University of Arkansas Little Rock data because it kind of showed some increase in population for the county, not the city. But if you look, instead of most of the calculations they use now are not based on population, it is based on maximum per day water demands. In other words, the meter reads more, the same meter than it did a few years ago. But if you look at this period here from about 05 to 12, you see a lot of growth there. Then why is it next year we're going to take off up through here? Just makes you want to scratch your head.
Not yet, please.
Quit scratching for a little while, George. Those are side things. But can we delay the need? We're already told we don't really need it. Can we delay that need? Well, you know, a lot of people seem to think so. I pointed out to the city board personally a time or two that you need a conservation plan. The last time I spoke to the board, we had the assistant city manager address my concerns and point out 3 or 4 different items where they were conserving. And I'm glad he put those on the record because not one of them had anything to do with conservation. Not one. Loss reductions. What's our current loss, 30% or better? Somewhere in that neighborhood. You know, 30%. That's a lot of water. Say if we could take 10% of that, that would give us a lot of million gallons per day, wouldn't it? And the current plan improvements that the health department was recommending, I don't know if those are finished or not. They haven't told us. You know, some poor fellow up there with the crane fell over and it killed him. And did the project just stop, or is it ongoing, or are we going to get that other 9 million or 6 million gallons a day, or are we not? Don't know. Lakeside plan improvements, by the way, recommended strongly by the health department. And I'm hearing here that we're going to mothball it. Those are old plants. That sounds like our city buildings. Remember City Hall leaking the roof and every other building that had a leak, we needed to just do away with it all. Lake Ricks, Dillon, Sanderson, Bethel, those lakes are good water containment facilities. And you know, at one time, we even had an intake from Bull Bayou. The health department, one of their letters even recommends that from our existing Washita treatment plant, run a line from there up to these lakes, up to the top lake, keep those filled up in the summertime. Doesn't have to take care of your peak. The health department has made a lot of good, solid recommendations, and it looks like Hot Springs has just said, "I'll take that." Probably none of you are too crazy about using sewer plant effluent. There's a lot of water available there. You know that's better quality water than what most cities take out of the river. I know when I was in Brownsville, Texas, you had a choice of taking it out of the Rio Grande Valley, the Rio Grande River. You wouldn't even want to know what floats around the Rio Grande. So sewer plant effluent was much better. But anyway, North Garland County, Regional Water Supply District also. They've got 3 million up there of unused Washita obligation, and they're already hooked into Lake Washita. Wonder how they did that and we couldn't. Makes you want to scratch your head. We don't have interconnected systems. Why do we not have interconnected systems? Doesn't matter if it's water, electricity, or what, you need interconnected systems. Now, you do need to have a meter on that. You know, our one interconnection now at North Garland County still doesn't have a meter, right?
It's emergency sales.
Just for emergency, you don't need a meter. Here's what we need to wait for, folks, in my humble opinion. This was an outstanding achievement right here. And David, did you ever close up on do you know you got your tongue sticking out? But everybody else there was really happy. But anyway, this is an agreement, and we paid $150,000 for this study, 18-month study, and we're in the 13 months now. So in about 5 months, we should hear from that. What's the rush? No, this is just nothing of any great importance, except that wasn't it kind of interesting down on South Lake Hamilton, you know, to have the sewer effluent coming out right above the intake? Well, look at what we got up here. Deja vu all over again. So are you concerned? And again, we've just covered location, cost, reliability, and need. I tried not to get into anything at all that would be considered technical, but there are several other things. The security of the various systems, Washita versus DeGray. System modifications required. The stagnation that you mentioned, the trihalomite paints. You know, that's stagnant out there because nobody's using that water. Sometimes remind me to tell you about the elevated storage they put down on Amity Road. So we've had some poor engineering in this city in the past. Hopefully it's turning around. But there is one thing here that's probably worth looking at a little closer. Cost to consumer. How many of you think your water bill is going to stay the same when this is done? Well, do you know your water bill is already doubled?
Yes.
You're familiar with the 2009, 17.5% and 2012, 35% increases that we're now living with a 3% increase. And is that not reflected on your sewer bill?
Yes.
So it's already pretty high.
That's right.
How many of you believe we're the 27th lowest in Arkansas? Didn't see any hands, huh? Anyway, again, the city says on their website they're serving 35,000 customers right now. Well, actually, it said that's our accounts. That's 90,000 customers. That's a pretty aggressive number there. But at any rate, if you use those numbers and you go over and just took this $225 million divided by that 35,000, that's $6,400 for every customer it's going to cost you just to put in the treatment plant, the pipeline, the intakes. $6,400 per person, or there's about 35,000 people in the city. That'd be every man, woman, and child in the city. So, if you consider that, and you know we left an awful lot of them out, the majority of them. But with bond costs, you know, when you pay all the bond daddies and interest and so forth over a 15-year term, don't that always invariably double the cost? Okay, let's just double the cost. That's $12,000 for every man, woman, and child. Divide that by 15 years, that's $857 per year. And by 12, that's only $71 a month that your water bill is going to go up. And I'm just calculating These are far from adequate. And what other capital costs? What about the operating costs? Do any of you believe that the operating costs are going to be much less than $10,000 a day? One person in the back. Oh, he wasn't listening good. That's Bill Smith. He'd never
I appreciate it, Bob.
No problem.
Scratch your head, Bill.
There you go. Oh, here's something else we didn't really need to remember. My voice is held up about as long as it's good, but it made it. Thanks for listening.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. This will make it Bob some water, seriously. No, you need
Okay.
water. You need water, Bob. Isn't that why we're here? We have one more brief speaker that asked to speak, Mr. Cliff Jackson. Cliff?
I'm a lawyer, but I will be by far the shortest speaker. I want to say this. I knew about this meeting this afternoon. I had no chance to invite my more progressive friends, many of whom are very concerned about the water project and would have been here had an opportunity to invite them. I want to say this, David. In my mind, the water project and annexation are interlinked. They're interlinked in this way. The city has practiced for years what I call elitist paternalism. You seem to think, the city fathers, that you know better what is good for us, the county residents, than we know what is good for us. And that is the underlying philosophy, in my opinion, that underscores both the annexation issue and the water issue. Now, there's two ways to govern. You can proceed with this elitist paternalism, and I've checked it out. I had a meeting with Becca Clark, city director. I thank her for meeting with me. But according to information from her, there was one public meeting at the fire department about this project. I was at the April 29th agenda meeting when it came up, and I sat there with my mouth open, aghast at what was presented by Chris Engineers and the city. Because I, who am among the most informed and literate voters in the county who own the water system, knew nothing about how far this thing had progressed. There was no input from the county residents, except for that one meeting, as far as I know, the April 29th meeting, and then the vote on May 5th. So what I would urge the city to do is to open up this issue and have a series of public meetings like today. I want to commend you, David. It was an excellent presentation from the city's viewpoint. Same thing, Sue. I don't know you. I was impressed. I mean, you're like a trial lawyer. You did a good job. Bob, you did an excellent job. I mean, there's different points of view. There's different things to consider. But we, the consumers, are the ones that ought to be informed. And as Sue said, many of us are ignorant. I learned things here tonight from David that goes to his side of the issue. But bottom line, back to what I began with, the city needs an attitude adjustment. And the attitude adjustment is to drop this elitist paternalism and to consider the will of the governed. Consider the consent of the governed. And there's two ways of approaching ruling. You can be elected as a director and then you take action regardless of public opinion, or you can invite public opinion, participation, input, including dissent, like the city does not do, like shutting down the televised comments from the public. Why? It is our city government. It's not my city government because I'm in the county and I'm opposed to being in the city. And this water project is one reason, another reason that I am opposed to it. But anyway, I would urge the city to do two things. Number one, hold a series of public meetings to educate the public, particularly the county residents, David, about what is going on here, about what the need is. Let's have, as we've had tonight, a balanced presentation from the other side as to concerns and issues, and then let's see where we're at on the project. Secondly, since I've been the primary proponent against annexation, I would urge the city to pass this resolution that I want to give you tonight that basically says that you renounce the use of forced annexation. What the city is doing now is confronting us every few years, and we beat them in 1998 because, by the largest percentage that they had been beaten out of 10 tries. And 16 years later, they're back doing the same thing. Again, there was one public meeting that I'm aware of, that I wasn't aware of at the time, on the annexation plan. Then we have all these charts and all these maps about areas they're going to grab. My area is in target number 1. You would think the city fathers would be smart enough not to target the head guy who beat them in 1998, wouldn't you? But they didn't. They've got me in the primary thing. But they're also doing something sneaky that y'all ought to know. And those of you who were at the Tea Party meeting where I spoke will know this. They have an agenda on the legislative agenda, an item on the legislative agenda to expand the meaning of island for purposes of annexation. Now what this means is this. It's very simple. If the city surrounds an island, the city can, by vote of the board of directors, take that area. That's the law. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, Fort Smith had the law changed so that if the fourth side borders on the state line, a military base, Fort Chaffee, or a national forest, the city can take it. You surround it on 3 sides. Now, what does Hot Springs want to do? What are they trying to sneak through the legislature? I'll tell you what I learned at the agenda meeting. They're trying to sneak through the fourth side being a navigable stream. In other words, they can, without a vote, without consent of the people they're taking, over the objections of the people they're taking, have a law passed that just by vote of the board they can take us, whether we want it or not. Now, let me tell you one final little thing on that point. You think navigable stream, that means the lakes or a river. No, it does not. I went to Michigan Law School, had riparian rights law. It can mean a stream that wide. So if the fourth side is bordered by a stream that wide, it ultimately goes into a real navigable stream. It's a navigable stream. So, David, what I'm telling you is I would like the city to hold this series of meetings to educate the people of the county and the city. I would like you to consider passing this resolution, and I will say this. I will tell you the end game. This is an initiated ordinance that I've drafted on the water project. And it will put on the ballot the issue of the Lake DeGray water project. It says very simply, and I'm not persuaded we ought to do this. I listened to David and I was impressed with some of the things he said. But if the city does not persuade us, if the city does not come forward with a case, then this resolution is very simple. Ordinance against the Lake DeGray water project. The city shall immediately cease all efforts, including expenditures of monies, to procure water from Lake DeGray and build a new water treatment plant unless and until city legal voters shall approve the same. Any monies previously approved or appropriated towards such project and not earned or expended shall be immediately recovered. That's very simple. Now again, I'm going to tell you, I'm not saying that I'm behind doing this. I'm just saying that when they target me on annexation, I target you, David. That's what I told you in an email. And that means on this water project. But again, I will not target you unless I am convinced that the Lake DeGray water project is a boondoggle. Right now, I'm leaning toward it being a boondoggle. Your presentation swayed me a little the other way. I listened to Sue, I listened to Bob, I swayed the other way. So I am open-minded. But the city needs to do its job and inform us, okay?
Mickey Gates walked in. Where's Mickey? There you are, Mickey. A new representative, Mickey Gates back there. Thank you for being here. Well, Cliff, that's a lot of swinging back and forth. You were, I guess I'm the one who gets my jokes.
You can use him in one of your shows if he gets.
And I tried it there too, it didn't work. You know, it's not very often that I get to introduce this gentleman here. We're through speaking, by the way. We're going to public comment here in a second. Back in the late 80s, he moved to Hot Springs, and he and I started off, I think we did a parade together on the radio. Try that one, folks. We announced a parade on the radio. Well, there's been a lot of parades go down that Central Avenue since then. We've been involved in almost all of them. And a few other 100 projects. Politically, I probably agree with Dick on less than 10% of the things that come up by here.
Good.
And we have some very in-depth conversations about most of them. But have you ever had a best friend that you don't agree with? He's just a good friend. Dick Antoine.
Okay, we're going to have question and answer, and I'm assuming Mr. Driggers is going to get a question. I think everything's going to go to David, that I would imagine. I didn't expect these other two people to speak. That wasn't on the agenda when I agreed to do this. It was strictly these two gentlemen talking, and Tea Party wasn't invited that I knew of, or Mr. Jackson. So I apologize to both of you for that happening. That wasn't what was supposed to happen. So,
I have a question.
first question,
Yes,
you
and
asked
I
for.
remembered.
Okay.
My question is, my name's Judy Coleman, and my question is how long, if this gets into working, how long does it take to be completed? And secondly, if it's completed, are those pipes going to be bringing water in daily? And if we don't need this for 20 or 30 years, what's going to happen to that water?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I appreciate the opportunity to hear the presentation or see it, because a lot of that I've not seen. So I hope I have the opportunity to respond with facts and data, not speculation. I don't know where the idea came from that we don't have a need to do something now. That's a no report I have seen. If you go back to the original postulate that we should have capacity that equals or provides an 80%, that 80% becomes the benchmark, but if you exceed that, you have to start planning. Then at we peaked at 23.5 million gallons in 2012. That means we should have capacity of at least 30 million gallons per day. If we take Lakeside offline, which we need to do, and we're looking out for your costs, so I'd like to have Mr. Driggers provide an engineering analysis of all the figures he put out there tonight, because I have to do that. The information that any of you can get, you don't need FOIA. We put this online. But every number that I give you has been certified. The plant cost is not $225 million, that's fiction. The cost of the intake, the wall water line, and the plant, if we go to DeGray, is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 61 million, not 225. Give you the data. But, so to answer your question, we need the water now. The minute that we start that plant to it opens, and this is why when Mr. Driggers sandbagged that one comment I made in the Vicksburg meeting for Holly Porter put down, if we keep moving this project ahead, because of the time it takes to get permits, right-of-way, we're looking at an opening of 2018. That's if we keep going according to Hoyle, as they say. Also, I might point out that the reason that we are, he talked about right-of-way being private, it's going to be expensive. Well, one of the advantages of DeGray is that a good part of that pipeline, and that's raw water, that's not treated water. So to me, it doesn't make any difference what county it's in, it's where it ends up. And so that raw water pipeline is crossing the Ross Family Foundation's property for miles. And we have been working with them on a route, including one that would go around Jack Mountain. So we have a willing and community-minded property owner who is working with us to provide that route. So does that answer your question?
No, I just want to know, you answered that you're gonna be using the water daily, I got that. But you didn't tell me, since you increased the daily input, what are you gonna do with this? Do you have a holding tank? Are you gonna do that? What are you gonna do with all this extra water you're gonna have?
Well, we're not gonna have extra water. We draw it from the raw water intake based on what you need.
Oh, okay.
You know, we have the ability to, like Bob said, a little bit fact taken out of context. We have to average 20 million gallons per day at Upper Lake Hamilton. We have the ability to go up to 30, which we can't do because the plant couldn't handle that. But our average daily has to be 20 million. It's a 3-month rolling average. But we only take in what we need. And typically what you do is you want to overproduce and make sure your elevated storage tanks are full.
Yes, I have a question. Did someone say that the county judge from Hot Spring County is here?
No.
Okay. Well, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
What would your interest of being a county judge in Hot Spring County have to do with anything about the city of Hot Springs water?
I can tell you honestly, the reason why I came over here this evening is because I am not familiar with the project, but when I found out that there was interest in running a pipeline through Hot Spring County, and that they were thinking about doing a water project in Hot Spring County, I wanted to know about it. And so that's why I came here. And honestly speaking, I'm as informed or less informed than you are about it. But like you, I want to know what the interests are and what the different views are. Like we were saying earlier, there's arguments on both sides. But I understand this is a unique position that you are in, but that's the reason why I was here. If it was going on in the county, I don't understand why our judge that's currently there, quite frankly, is not here. Because I think he would probably need to answer some questions. But that's not going to happen. But
Thank you.
I'd assume you're probably going to want water once you stay still.
At our expense?
Yes, since we're all here,
Don't have to buy it.
since we're all here, and the reason I'm directing this at our city manager is because you are our city manager, not Bob Driggers. Can we get a commitment out of you to hold the meetings? The last time we had the issue with Jacobs, we had it at the Civic Center, and we had standing room only. I believe Mr. Antoine and a whole bunch of people were there, and it was very productive. And then it moved to the Austin Hotel. We had a lot of public input. In our 2010 census, the city lost a lot of people. The county is growing and growing. What we want to make sure is that the people consider living and investing in the city of Hot Springs, and that they feel like they are being included. Not everybody goes online and clicks to your website. So you're excluding all those people. I've got a computer. It's down half the time. But I want to feel like I'm included. I believe in Hot Springs, and I've invested and will continue to invest. But I don't want the people that are here, and I'd like to know how many people here actually live in the city. Well, we've got a few. But that is why there is an exodus, because they feel like they're being burdened with everything, and so they move out. Then they move out, and then they're hit, even though they've moved out. I know somebody who moved to two counties away, just to get away from what they felt was taxation without representation. And I think What?
The question is,
The
will they
commitment
have
for
opening?
I can't speak on the governing body's part. I mean, we're moving on the project. That's already been decided. The discussion about rate increases and the impacts on customers, there will be many, many meetings on that. No question.
But that's going to be after the fact, kind of.
Yeah, would be.
So you're saying the city will not hold public meetings for the county and the city residents because you're already fully committed to the project?
The city just signed a $4 million contract.
I know you did, but that's a whole lot less than even the 61 million that you say it's gonna cost.
They have- I mean,
Less
they
than
could-
the 225 that Bob says it's gonna cost.
The city will, that's not my decision about holding public meetings.
All right, will you recommend it?
On whether or not to go to DeGray?
No, a series of public meetings on the Lake DeGray.
I have no problem, I'm here tonight because I am wanting to give you the facts that affect you when we make this expansion.
But you have only the Tea Party here tonight, basically. Is there anybody here that's not a Tea Party member? We got a few. All right, but it's mostly Tea Party people. So the general public, other than the Tea Party, did not know about this meeting. There was no publicity in the paper.
You know, we have had,
That's not his fault.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying.
we've had so many meetings on this subject all over the community. I mean, I don't know what you know or don't know, but I think this city has done a remarkable job getting information out about this plant. We have sent out notices in your bills. We have developed a video that we put on our TV channel. We have done everything to bring people in the loop.
Was there a meeting other than the one meeting
Yes, we
that
have
Clark told me about?
multiple
Public
meetings on the water issue. Becca's talking about the decision to go ahead and authorize
Yes.
Chris to begin
Yes.
work.
Yes.
Leading up to that, there were workshops, and I can get you a list of every discussion we've had. So it's folly to suggest that there hasn't been meetings. There's been a multitude.
But have they been publicized?
Yeah, they've been publicized.
Back in the back.
So
Why?
send out notices in the bills, did you send those to all of the Garland County as well?
Oh, sure.
Because that,
Not all of Garland.
It's the first I've heard of it.
I haven't seen anything in our,
We only, this is a business.
I understand, I'm just asking.
Put
a question. I
aside
just
that
haven't
we're a
seen
government,
anything
this
in
is
our
not a
bills.
governmental deal.
Right.
It's a business deal. Now, with all due respect to Director Maruther, Thurman, I'm sorry, David. Mr. Jackson, you know what most cities do? I've managed 3 other water utilities.
They do on what?
They serve the green. You know what they do after that? They provide wholesale water, and you let these people figure out how to administer distribution. They have to worry about water supply. They have to do the administration. We're treating you as a retail customer, not a wholesale customer. I can tell you that is very, very, very unusual. We're having to go up here just a block from City Hall and tell people who can barely afford a living why we're having to spend $60 million to provide water supply when most of the growth is not in the city. So keep that in mind. I mean, the city has no obligation to serve you.
Are you saying the city is amenable to doing a wholesale deal with the county?
They've always been amenable to that. I mean, this area out here, we get a lot of growth picture out here in western Garland County. I mean, we've got projects being proposed 10, 15 miles from here. Go out and form your own district. That's what that's what happens in most communities.
Was your question answered?
I
The
didn't
question is, if you're,
I didn't actually hear an answer to it. All I was trying to find out was if you had actually sent those notices out in the bills to the people in the county. While in the county, I get those bills and I haven't seen any notice on that. So that's why I was
Well,
asking.
are we talking about notice, or are we talking about information?
I thought you
No,
said.
We send out newsletters in our billing all the time, not to all of Garland County, because all of Garland County is not.
Okay, so based on that, I may not have received it because you don't send it to all of Garland County.
Yeah, if
That's
you're in
what I was
Kinsey
trying
or
to-
North Garland, we don't send you that.
Mr. Pritchard,
Well, to be fair, a lot of these meetings were city meetings and that they weren't necessarily public meetings, but they were publicized. David, I really admire what you did going down and securing the agreement that you did so that we have the potential, the possibility of acquiring water from DeGray. However, I'm extremely troubled because the last regime, prior to your taking the job, they gave us a bunch of information, says we can go to 2030. Now you're giving us some information, says we need to start now. I heard someone from Chris say we needed a 7-year picture. Well, if that's the case, we could start in 2022. And lastly, I have to tell you, I don't believe the population projections. Let's look at history. I want to borrow something that Lance Hudnall said one time. He said it's a darn good thing that the voters defeated the new city building because we wouldn't have the revenue right now to pay the bill. And what we're talking about now is we're projecting population growth that history does not demonstrate that. And while I admire the University of Arkansas, I think they're full of nonsense in their projections for the growth. Let's wait till 2020 and see what our population change is, because it only changed 9% in the earlier decade for the total county. And I think we're going to see some reductions. I don't think we're going to see the growth rate that they're predicting, because I don't know where the people are going to work. I don't know where the jobs are going to be. You can't grow if you don't have jobs, and these water rates will kill jobs. These water rates will kill
There's an old saying that where the water goes, the area grows, right off the bat. If you don't have water, you won't grow. I can show you example around the country where they don't have water and they're not growing. So, if we believe in the future of Garland County, see my friend back there, George Dewey, I mean, I'm hoping that people are out there trying to develop so we do grow. If we don't have water, it's over.
But we've been told we have water till 2030, so in 2023 we could start this project after the 2020 census, and by then we'll also have all the answers on Washita that we're waiting for in the Corps of Engineering. But I do admire what you've done again to make a start.
Just remember, our margin right now, we're lucky we've had 2 summers that have been cool. If we had a 2012, remember our margin is about 1.5, 2 million gallons per day. That assumes that all our 2 plants are operating with maximum efficiency. We haven't had a major distribution break. We haven't had a fire. And I've never been in a utility that has this thin of a margin.
Okay, well, I'll concede to you that you have a study and you have a lot of numbers, but I'll also ask you to understand that all of the documentation, all of the information given us by Jacobs, we've now thrown out the window and said, this is all wrong, and now we're short. Who do we believe? We were told to believe this people, now you're telling us to believe these people, and my statement is, I don't find any one of you more credible than them.
Well,
48.3% of all statistics are made up on the spot.
yes, ma'am, question.
I was amazed at that
Stand up, please.
I was amazed at the 35 to 40% loss. Is that normal?
No. Well, if I'm allowed to respond. When we talk about water line loss, you really have to look at it as uncollected revenue. I can promise you, going back in this area's past, there are a lot of illegal hookups out there. And so it might be, we're not collecting money, but we're having to supply the water. So, we have been diligently trying to find all these hookups. Well, last year we found a water line that actually went into Hot Spring County that we didn't know about. So that's one issue. Number two, in production, you're going to lose some water. Nobody operates 100%. Probably the average in the country, if you went to AWWA, which is the American Water Works, they'd tell you that average is probably 16%, 16 to 20. Now you have to remember in that 16, in that group, to get an average, you're dealing with a lot of new developments. I'm sure the city of Plano, Frisco, Bentonville don't have 30% loss. But I can tell you, having been in an older city in Texas, the older cities in Texas get the 30 to 40% because some of their pipelines are 100 years old. And so what we're doing and have been is we are putting about $1 million a year in replacing old water lines and trying to eliminate that leakage. But here again, while we need to get that down, 20% of your peak use, even if you were able to get that down to, to get it down to 20% or 25%, you're not going to grow your way out of the system just with that. Likewise with conservation. Let me just debate Bob's point that we don't have a plan. Oh yeah, we have a plan. What this city has done, or this water utility, is that the more water you use, once you hit a certain usage, while from an economic standpoint, the cost per unit would decline. The more you use, the less it costs. Well, we have what they call an inverted block rate. So the more you use, the more it costs. And what that's done in our utility, we have numbers to prove it, and that's data that's not made up on the spot. We will show you how the average water usage in our water utility is relatively low. And I think it shows that those water rates are discouraging use, primarily irrigation, watering, whatever. Yep.
Okay, so,
yeah.
folks, I'm sorry, the library's getting ready to close.
Okay, I'll make it real quick.
Well, we got another question back there.
Okay, well, the agenda meetings and all these meetings, we can come, but we can't speak.
That's city board, that doesn't have anything.
Well,
to
this is our speak now.
Speak now.
do you have a question?
I have a question, yes. The location of the proposed plant. Based on the maps that I saw there, it looks like it obviously is in Hot Springs County, but most of the development area that you said is going to come about is Hot Springs
Now,
County.
the plant would not be located in Hot Spring County. The intake is in Hot Spring County.
But all the land that you were talking about,
We have to cross Hot Spring County. We're going to be working with property owners. We're working with the major property owner now. Where we cross under county roads, we will make sure that those are rebuilt according to probably a higher spec than they have now. But the plant will be in Garland County.
well, I'm speaking more of the development, where you're looking at the areas that are going to potentially develop because it's raw land.
We
Are they
think,
Garland County or are they Hot Spring County?
well, they're Garland County. Yeah, we think that the area between 7, and it's, it's not a strategy or anything, it's just what I think. I think the 290 corridor from 7 all the way over toward Garland Gardens is an ideal place for future development. Not that it won't occur in other places, but I predict you're going to see some growth that way.
Are there large?
Okay, folks, I'm sorry, but we got it dismissed because the library's getting ready to close. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And David's phone number, you can call him at any time, I'm sure.
Let me say one word because I didn't get an opportunity otherwise. The map showing the plant located in Hot Spring County is Chris Engineers at the City of Hot Springs map, not mine.